All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started with our week 3 live lecture. And this week we've got quite a few things to cover in terms of your assignments. So we're going to try to push through this material as quickly as possible to get you back to your normal everyday routine schedule, so forth. So with that in mind, though, if you do have questions along the way, feel free to let me know. Or if you're watching the recorded version of this meeting, you can, of course, send me an email on the course, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. All right, so first and foremost, welcome to the meeting. I'm so glad that you could join me either live or for the recorded version of our week 3 live lecture. This week, we are going to, of course, talk about our assignments. We're going to talk about the details and the expectations of those assignments to set you up for success. We're also going to talk in terms of some of the concepts and things that we're going over, just to give you some better examples of things. And also, we'll have time at the end for any questions that you may have pertaining to anything that we're going over in our lessons this week or anything to do with your assignments. All right, so your assignments this week, guys, you've got quite a few chapters to read. You've got chapters 6, 7, 8, and 14. So make sure that you're going ahead and starting those readings soon. If you haven't already, I hope that you have, though. Your weekly discussion this week is going to be on real photography. This is something that we see a great deal in today's society, and so I'd like to talk about it and get your thoughts on it. Don't forget that your initial post was due on Tuesday by 11:59 p.m., and all reply posts should be made by Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time as well. This week we are also going to have our design project, and for the design project I'll be going over that in a little bit, but I do want to point out one thing to you with this. I don't expect anyone in here to necessarily be graphic designers or, you know, things like that. So if you're not that great at designing things, don't stress about that. I'd rather you pay more attention to designing a simple logo and then just making sure that you're meeting the other expectations in terms of what's due on the presentation slides and so forth. And then also we're going to be talking about the MAP, and that's our media analysis project in the course. So I'm going to give you a short introduction of that. I'm going to talk about the timeline and things, and also talk about your topic proposal, which will be due this week. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about your discussion first. The discussion has to do this week with digital photography, and it's something we're all very familiar with in today's society. It's becoming more simple. Well, let me put it this way. It's becoming easier than ever to alter images simply by using a simple computer program to change things around like Photoshop or so forth. But can we really believe what we see? And that's a good question, and something that should always be at the forefront of our minds when we look at digital photography in terms of advertisements, the media, what we see on social media, and so forth. So, considering that photography is a medium that can convey, millions and millions of emotions in one single image, I want you to think about, is it ethical for a photographer to draw a more emotional response by digitally altering an image? What are your thoughts on that? Is this in any way different than using different lighting techniques in a studio to create an effect? What do you think about that? So that being said, like I said, I'd like your initial post made by Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time, and all reply posts made by Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time as well. Just a reminder, but late submissions in this course in the discussion forum outside of the active academic week, or also submitting your weekly live lecture code outside of the academic week is not accepted. So while I can give you a little wiggle room sometimes on your written assignments if an emergency comes up, I just can't give you any wiggle room in terms of your discussions and your live lecture code words for each week. So those have to be submitted during the active academic week. Just a reminder. All right, so let's go over again. Let's talk a little bit more about this digital photography. So here is an image that has caused quite the stir. And this is an image of Julia Roberts in a Lancome um, makeup advertisement. It was something that was very much in a lot of the ladies magazines and so forth, in fashion magazines things like that and so forth in our society a few years back. So I'd like you to take a look at this image and think about what they're advertising here. So they're talking about this this base. Basically, it's a foundation. It's a type of makeup. Um, so I want you to think about that. And I also want to you to think about her image there. All right. So with that in mind, let's look at this one as well. So let's take a look at this image. What do they have in common? What do you think these two images might have in common? Well, I'll tell you what they have in common. The images have been altered. So, in recent years, more and more cosmetic companies, magazines, and just advertisements as a whole have really come under fire for this less than truthful photo editing techniques used to help sell more products. So, one of the more recent ones that I could think of would be the Lancome advertisements using Julia Roberts, and also the Maybelline advertisements with Christy Turlington. So, have these advertisements, in your opinion, have they crossed the line? Are they ethical or are they unethical, in your opinion? So, one thing to think about here is what they're advertising. They're advertising this, for instance, here we've got this um, age defying foundation, if you will. And if you look at her image, Christy Turlington is, I believe, she's in her later 40s, I believe. And if you look at the image here, regardless of age, she has not one blemish, not one wrinkle, nothing like that on her face. And they are marketing an anti-aging foundation. So, I mean, it all depends on you. It's all a matter of personal opinion, but I do want to point out those facts here because I want you to think about, have these advertisements crossed the line? Are they ethical or unethical in your opinion? Should companies be allowed to retouch these types of photos? These are some of the many things we're going to be looking at this week in terms of real photography, and some things that I would like you to address in your initial post in the discussion this week. Okay, so with that being said, let's take a look at the design project this week. All right, so the design project, I want you to just kind of get this out. Don't overthink the design project. Like I said, don't overthink it. Now, you will need to be familiar with PowerPoint to construct this project because it is a PowerPoint presentation. And if you're not familiar with PowerPoint, this is something I would suggest that you contact the tutoring center at the school for, so they can work with this and work with you on this and help you on the project to be more familiar and understand how to do certain things. But what you're going to do is you're going to completely redesign the IBM logo. So this is your chance to be creative. Be as creative as you like. When you choose to redesign the logo, you can use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or any other application you'd like to change up the logo to design your new logo. So some people like to do as simple as taking a few pieces of clip art and some word art and creating a logo that way, nothing too difficult. Other people like to take it a step further and use design programs. I will say this, guys, if you create a file in a big um, design style software and you try to put it in your PowerPoint presentation, the file may be too big. So just a tip there, if you're a pro. If you're not a pro, don't worry about that. You can use any application you'd like to recreate the logo, but just remember that ultimately you'll be taking that logo and put it into your PowerPoint presentation, because that's all I'm going to need for your submission is your PowerPoint presentation, and you will need to follow the PowerPoint presentation slide guidelines. So using PowerPoint to create a presentation, you're going to be creating a presentation to sell your logo, so to speak, okay? So it's going to be 3 to 5 slides long, this PowerPoint presentation. On the first slide of the presentation, you're going to describe the features of the new logo. You're going to include the logo itself on this first slide, and you're going to describe the text that you've chosen for this new logo, your color selections, your font choice, any images you might have used, and more. Why did you choose these things? Why that specific font, or why that specific image, whatever it is that you've chosen to incorporate in your new logos. That's going to be the first slide. For the second slide, I'd like you to create a one-page advertisement that combines images and words and the actual logo to introduce the new IBM logo to the employees, customers, and shareholders. So that's going to be your second slide. So it's going to be a one-page advertisement. You're going to include the logo, and you're basically going to have an advertisement that introduces the new IBM logo to employees, customers, and shareholders. And then for the last few slides, I want you to develop a written rationale as to how your design for the new logo addresses the values of the organization, how the new logo would be perceived by the employees, customers, and shareholders as well. So just remember that these are three very different types of audiences, employees, customers, and shareholders. Very different in terms of why this logo would meet their needs. So develop a written rationale on slide 3. If you'd like to do 5 slides, that's fine, 3, 4, and 5, that addresses the values of the organization and how the new logo would be perceived by employees, customers, and shareholders. So that's going to be those last few slides. And then, of course, for a complete, detailed overview of the design project, you can always click on week 2 in our course, and you'll see the design project introduction, and that'll basically talk through everything I just went over. Don't forget to submit your completed assignment as a PowerPoint presentation to the Dropbox. Not below, obviously it says below there, but in our course. And please make sure to check our course calendar for specific due dates. But I will tell you this, your design project will be due this Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Okay. So with that being said, here's the rubric for the design project. So the student created a new logo for IBM is 20 points. The description of the logo in terms of color, font choice, image choice, and etc. matches the design of the logo. That's 10 points. The advertisement on slide 2 combines words, images, and the logo itself into an effective presentation or an effective advertisement. Okay, that's 20 points. The written rationale, that's slides 3, 4, and 5. The written rationale explains how the logo relates to the values of the organization. That's 20 points. And the written rationale addresses how the logo would be perceived by employees, customers, and shareholders. 20 points. Proper spelling, grammar, and language used is going to be 10 points for a total of 100% on this project. Okay, so that's the design project. It's pretty straightforward. If you do have questions, you can reach out to me using email. But like I said, if you don't know how to operate PowerPoint, you're going to need to talk to our tutoring center at the school. That's just not something I can instruct you how to do while I'm not sitting with you in real time. So let's say it that way. So the tutoring center can help you with that. Also, don't overthink the logo. You can be simple with the logo. It's no big deal. Just remember that ultimately you're submitting to me that final 3 to 5 slide PowerPoint presentation that adheres to all the things I just went over. All right, so let's flip gears now. Let's talk about the media analysis project. And you'll hear me refer to this as the MAP. Media analysis project is the MAP. All right, so let's talk about that. Well, what is the MAP? The MAP stands for, like I said, Media Analysis Project, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So we're going to choose from our approved list, and our approved list is going to be, you may choose a television series, a famous work of art. It cannot be an unknown work of art or just some random image you found. It has to be a famous work of art. Think about Starry Night or the Mona Lisa or something along those lines you could choose if art is more your thing than television. Or let's say that you're not really into television, a television series, and you don't really want to do art, but you like films. You can choose one specific film to analyze for this project as well. If, and this is important, guys, so listen to me on this. If that film is part of something like a trilogy, like the Harry Potter series or something like that, then you would need to only choose one film to analyze. You would not analyze the entire collection of Harry Potter films. Okay, so you would choose one film to analyze. For a television series, you're not just analyzing one episode, you would choose a whole series. So let's say that I wanted to choose the series Friends, which has been off the air for a while, but Friends, I would analyze the television series Friends. If you choose art, you need to choose something very famous and very well known because you'll need the research. So you might choose to use, like I said, Starry Night or the Mona Lisa or the creation of Adam or something along those lines. So this week, we're going to be introducing the 6 analytical perspectives for analyzing media by author and theorist David Lodge from his book Small World. And I'm going to be going over what 6 perspectives we're using to analyze either our television series, our film, or our famous work of art in our paper. So these perspectives I'm about to go over are going to form the basis for your media analysis project, MAP. Okay. All right, so what are the 6 analytical perspectives for analyzing media? Well, that's a great question. The 6 analytical perspectives and the ones you're going to be using to analyze your television series, your film, or your famous work of art are as follows. We've got you're going to start off your paper with the personal perspective. So what was your gut reaction to that? You're going to describe to me what your gut reaction was to that television series, that film, or that famous work of art. After you fully go into the personal perspective in your paper, you're going to move on to the historical perspective. And you're going to talk about what that image's place in history is. And I'm going to go over all of these in much more detail in just a moment. After you fully go into the historical perspective, you're going to move on to the technical perspective. So I want you to consider the process decisions. What went into the actual creation of that television series, that film, or that famous work of art? As you can see, you're going to be using a lot of research for this paper. Next, after the technical perspective, you're going to move into the ethical perspective in your paper. What was the moral responsibility there of the person, the artist who created this famous work of art, or the producers or directors or screenwriters behind this television series or this film? After that, you're going to go into the cultural perspective. Excuse me. So how did this television series, this film, this famous work of art, whatever it is that you've chosen, how did it impact society? What cultural references are present there? And then lastly, you're going to go into the critical perspective. So after all this after analyzing this television series, this film, or this famous work of art using all these perspectives, the last one we're going to cover is the critical perspective, because that is, what is your reasoned opinion of it now? Has your opinion of this television series, this film, or this famous work of art changed since you initially saw it, because you've just analyzed it in much more greater detail now? And that's basically it, guys. There's a lot more details to it. I'm about to go over all those things, so just hang tight on that. All right. So right now, what do you need to do? Right now, you need to choose, do you want to, or excuse me, you need to choose what famous work of art or what television series or what one film you might like to focus on for this project. Now, I give you those guidelines to follow. So a famous work of art or a television series or a film, one film, not more than one. I give you that as a guideline as to what to choose. Your directions in the course allow for internet websites and so forth, guys. I've never seen a student be very successful at that. So I say your approved list is either a television series, a film, or a famous work of art. Now, in your assignment this week, you're going to be submitting to me your topic proposal. So you need to choose a film or a television series or a famous work of art that you would like to analyze for this project. But you can't just tell me in your topic proposal, I'd like to choose a television series because I think this would be interesting. You need to tell me what television series specifically you're choosing, or what film or what famous work of art, and why you've chose it. Okay, that's going to be your topic proposal this week. And then from there, you'll see I either approve or deny your request. And I'm going to tell you guys, if it's one film or one television series or one famous work of art, you're going to get approved. If you request to use an image you found in a magazine that you're not sure where it came from, but you'd like to analyze it further, probably not going to be approved, because I know you're not going to find enough research on it to successfully do the project. If you say, I'd like to analyze the internet, that's going to be denied, guys. That's not on the approved list. So you need to choose a film, a television series, or a famous work of art. All right. So what do you do once your topic proposal has been approved? Good question. That's where we're going to start actually um, brainstorming our thoughts on how we'd like to go in the paper. So ultimately, your paper is going to be properly formatted in APA style. You're going to have a properly formatted title page. And then in the content portion of your paper, your content portion is going to be, I believe it's 6 to 8 pages, but we're going to get to that in just a second. And the first thing you're going to do in your paper is the very first thing is you're going to start off with a personal perspective. Each perspective will be covered separately throughout the paper. As you cover a perspective, and they need to follow in this order. As you cover each perspective, at the top, before covering the perspective, you need to type personal perspective in bold, come down one line, and then fully go over the personal perspective in terms of the famous film, famous work of art, or television series that you've chosen. Okay? So, you're going to start off with the personal perspective. In the personal perspective, you're basically going to include that subtitle at the top, like I told you, and then you're going to describe your thoughts and your initial personal insights on this film, this television series, or this work of art. What was your initial gut reaction? How did you feel when you first watched the show or the film or saw that famous work of art? Remember that you should be describing your first initial reaction to this film, this television series, or this work of art. What was your gut reaction? How did it make you feel? Now, this should be the first perspective in your paper. You should type personal perspective in bold as a subtitle above this section, and then fully describe your thoughts regarding this perspective. Sometimes students ask me, should the subtitles be left aligned in the paper or should they be center aligned? Left aligned works great, but if you center it, that's fine too. So either way, as long as you have the subtitle there, that's all I'm asking for. And okay, so let's say that I've chosen the television series Friends to analyze for my MAP project. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to include a properly formatted title page, and then after that, I'm going to jump straight into the personal perspective in the content portion of my paper. So some things I might describe in the personal perspective might be the first time I saw the show, I didn't think I was going to like the show. It seemed to me that it was just a group of young 20-somethings living in New York City, living the good life. Lots of free time. Nobody worked a lot during that show, and they still lived in these fabulous apartments and just had this wonderful life. And so for me, I just thought it was a little cliche, and so it wasn't something I initially thought, I'm going to enjoy this television series. So luckily, I watched more than one episode, and I really got into it, and now my husband and I love the show, and we own all the seasons. So, but that's what I would initially go over in the personal perspective here. Okay, so from here, after I fully go into the personal perspective, I'm going to move into the historical perspective. So before I start this section of the paper, I'm going to type historical perspective in bold, a subtitle above this section, and then jump down and go straight into the historical perspective. So for this, you're going to want to consider, when do you think it says image, but when do you think the work of art that you've chosen, or the film or the television series, when was it made? This is where research is really going to come in, guys. So is there a specific style that this film, this television series, or this famous work of art follows? Remember, we've talked about um, in terms of art. If you chose one of the past paintings I talked about from George Seurat, and like, for instance, I talked about I believe it was either my week 1 or week 2 lecture, I talked about George Seurat's, I'm trying to think of the name of that piece. I'm so sorry. I'm drawing a blank. It's, well, one of his pieces is the Eiffel Tower, 1889. I believe that was it. So he used this style of pointillism, which is putting precise dots of paint onto a canvas to create an entire image. So if I chose that painting to cover for this entire project, then in this part I would talk about his specific style. The specific style that was chosen for this was pointillism, and I would talk about how that works, and I would talk about how it was, what time period this was created, and so forth. Okay, that's just kind of a tidbit on art. Most of my students choose film or television series, but art's great too. You can choose art if you'd like to. All right, so If I was talking about the television series Friends, though, because I'm going to go back to that because a lot of people choose television series and films and so forth, then for this section, I would talk about when the show was created. It was created in the 1990s. I'd have to do research to find out exactly the year. Is there a specific style that this imitates? I would discuss in this section of the paper that it imitates a typical sitcom and especially a comedy style sitcom. And I would talk about the things that go into that. What are the historical elements that ties into this television series, this famous work of art, this film, whatever it is that you've chosen? I would talk about how this show ties into history. So when I watch this television series, there are several cultural references to things that were very prevalent in the 1990s. So sometimes they talk about political candidates who were in office during that time period. That tells us what place and time this television, this sitcom was on the air. It also has a lot of product placement in there that, for instance, Snapple. Snapple was a big drink in the 90s. And so I would talk about how that's present, and that's another historical tie to the time period in which this television series was created. So you see what I'm doing there. It's just how are the historical elements there? How does it, how does it represent this television and this film or this famous work of art's place in history? Okay, so this should be the second perspective in your paper. You should type historical perspective above this as a subtitle, then fully go into the historical perspective before proceeding to the next perspective, which is the technical perspective. So with a technical perspective, we're thinking about how was this film or this television series or this famous work of art, how was it produced? Okay, how was it created? What techniques were employed to create this film, this television series, or this famous work of art? Was it, if you're talking in terms of a television series or a film, what type of film was used? What type of equipment was used to shoot the show or the film? What kind of camera angles were used, special effects, and so forth. So you're going to go into all the details in terms of the creation of this film or this television series or this famous work of art. So if you're talking in terms of work of art, you're going to want to cover things like what size was the canvas, what materials were used to create this work of art, what techniques were used, and so forth. So this should be the third perspective in your paper. You'll type technical perspective in bold as a subtitle above this section, fully go into this, and then you'll move into the next perspective, which is the ethical perspective. So the ethical perspective has to do with moral responsibility. So in terms of your film, your television series, or your famous work of art, whatever it is that you've chosen, was the image maker socially responsible? So, for instance, a lot of the films and television series that are out nowadays have a lot of controversial topics in them. They can be rather graphic, they can contain sexual content, they can contain, um, profanity, violence, and so forth. These are some things you might want to cover in terms of ethical perspective. So, you want to talk about, was the producer, the director, the writers, whoever, were they socially responsible? What kind of iffy ethical guidelines were there present in this film, this television series, or this famous work of art? Does the film, the television series, or the famous work of art cause unjust harm? So if we're talking in terms of, I just told you about television series and film, but let's say we're talking about art. Well, you'd have to do your research, but depending on what piece you've chosen, in the much earlier centuries, a lot of times, if you weren't painting, for instance, someone of the aristocracy or someone who is just well to do in their community, then your other subjects had to be someone that you could pay really cheaply to model for you. And in those time periods, you'd have to do your research, but a lot of times prostitutes were used as models because they could be paid very cheaply, or or excuse me, they were very inexpensive, and so they were used as models. So that might be something in terms of ethics that you could discuss. You can go into just a wide range of certain things. Sometimes it could be, um, excuse me, it could be a person's rights were violated to create this work of art, whatever it is. So that's things you would cover here in terms of ethics. Okay, so this should be the fourth perspective in your paper. Before this section, you should type ethical perspective in bold as a subtitle, then fully go into the ethical perspective before moving into the cultural perspective. And the cultural perspective is going to have to do with this film, this television series, or this famous work of art's societal impact. So I want you to consider the following. How does the story in the film, the plot, or the television series, how does it reflect cultural values? What does it say about cultural values of that time period? Did this film, this television series, or this famous work of art affect our culture at all? Okay, so if I was going back to my example of this sitcom Friends, it had a huge cult following during the time period in which it was on the air. I mean, it was a big deal. People loved this show. It was the number one show. I mean, it was just, it really affected our culture. I would probably talk in terms of how it reflected the culture of the time. For instance, we all operate under certain cultural guidelines that may or may not be stated in our society. For example, a lot of times Westerners, especially Americans, have no problem with women working, with women taking on powerful roles in the workplace, with women living independently without a husband or without a partner. Um, there's also instances where people may they may cohabitate without necessarily being married. So that is a reflection sometimes of Western culture. It's not something that is globally, you know, the norm, but it is something that is prevalent in today's Western society. So that would be a reflection of culture in terms of it being in this film, this television series. For example, with the series Friends, two of the characters, two of the leading ladies, had very high powered jobs. One was a chef in New York, another one was a executive with Ralph Lauren. So that is a reflection of our Western culture, women taking on powerful roles. Also, the women lived independently. They didn't have, they weren't married and things like that in most of the series at least. So again, that's a reflection of our culture, the powerful independent woman. We could also explore the fact that two of the guys lived together on that show. They were heterosexual men, and they just happened to live together because they wanted a roommate, and so that's also can be a reflection of our culture as well. So just some things to think about there. In terms of art, you can dissect the piece that you've chosen, maybe look at the attire that the model is wearing and talk about how that was a reflection of culture during that time period, maybe certain hairstyles, any particular jewelry, the furnishings that might be in the painting, and so forth, and how that was a part of society and culture of that time period. Okay, so after this perspective, you're going to move into the critical perspective. So once you've analyzed this film, this television series, or this famous work of art using all these different perspectives, I'd like you to give your reasoned opinion of this film, this television series, or this famous work of art now. So I want you to consider the following. What do you think of this television series, this film, or this famous work of art now that you've spent so much time looking at it and studying it and researching it? Has your thoughts on this changed since you first saw it? Are your thoughts different from how you viewed it initially? How so? So this should be the sixth and final perspective of your paper. You'll type critical perspective as a subtitle above this section and then fully go over your thoughts in terms of this perspective. After the critical perspective is where your paper will end. So, with that being said, this is a 6 to 8 page double spaced paper, not including your title page, reference page, and any images you'd like to include. If you'd like to include images, they should be included as an appendix section after your reference page. You are never, ever, ever, ever to include images in the content portion of your paper. This is not proper APA style. Also, you should not have bulleted lists in your content portion of your paper. Everything should be written in paragraph form. Don't forget that if you've chosen a famous work of art, you're not to focus on the artist, but rather dissecting, using all six perspectives, this famous work of art. okay? Don't focus on the artist. So starting this week and through week 5 in the course, you're going to analyze whatever you've chosen. I know it says print, film, television series, or internet, but your approved list is a television series or one film or one famous work of art. If you would, you're not to analyze a collection of anything. It's one singular thing. So a television series is fine. You'd analyze the entire series, not just one episode. But a film should only be one film as a whole, or a famous work of art, just one work of art. Okay. So remember that you should have a properly formatted title page. After that, you'll jump straight into the content portion of your paper. You should start at the very top with the personal perspective. And then on your 8th page should be, or 6th to 8th page, whatever, should be the critical perspective. So don't type a full page of an introduction before jumping into, on page 2, your personal perspective. That's not allowed. You should start your personal perspective on the top of page 1 of your content of your paper. The ending of your paper needs to be the critical perspective. Don't include a 2-page conclusion or anything like that. It needs to end with a critical perspective. Okay. This should be a detailed analysis of this film, this television series, or famous work of art. In 6 to 8 full type pages, your writing must take up 6 to 8 pages. Do not insert images in your paper. Images and photos are only to be included in an appendix section after your reference page. Please follow the format of the APA sample paper I sent you and mirror the format exactly. Also, please clearly identify each perspective as you discuss it by creating those subtitles above each section. 12-point font size. So you would say at the top of page 1, personal perspective in bold, 12-point font, no larger. Jump down 1 line and then go straight into the personal perspective. After that, you'll do the same thing for the historical perspective. And you'll just keep going till you end with the critical perspective on the last portion of your paper. All right, so you must include 4 credible sources in addition to 1 source for the media itself. So with that being said, you need a total of 5 references for this paper. All sources that you use need to be cited in text as well as on a reference page at the end of your paper. Your final paper must include proper grammar and punctuation, as that is a part of your grade. Here's the MAP timeline. So this week you're going to be submitting your topic proposal. So for this, you need to include a properly formatted title page, and then you'll need about 1 paragraph discussing what you've chosen for this project, your specific television series, specific film, or specific famous work of art that you've chosen. So you might say, I've chosen to analyze the television series Friends. And the reason I've chosen the television series Friends is because, and you would tell me that. Okay. So explain not just what your topic is specifically, but also why you've chosen it. Don't forget your title page. Project proposals will be due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time of week 3. Once you select a topic and it's been approved, you need to start your research. So next week, in week 4, you'll have your outline and thesis, which will be due. And in that assignment, you're going to create an outline for your media analysis project. Your outline should show key points that you want to bring up in your paper. You'll want to start to integrate that research in your outline. And you'll need to make sure to include your references, 5 properly formatted references, with your outline assignment next week. So you can find a sample outline in the course. It says under week 7. I apologize. It'll be under week 4. And please mirror this format exactly, in terms of what an outline should look like. Outlines will be due on the Sunday, the end of the lesson 4 on that Sunday. And then in week 5, your final paper's due. So by now, you should have researched your topic. You should have written your paper. And it's just time to submit your final paper on that Sunday in week 5. The rubric for the topic proposal this week is 50 points for the student selected a topic appropriate for the project, and then 5 points for the student included a rationale as to why they chose their project. And remember, your approved list is either a television series, a specific film, or a specific work of art. And you have to actually tell me what specifically you've chosen, not just, I've chosen to analyze a television series. You need to say, I've chosen to analyze the television series Friends, and here's why, okay? Or a film or a work of art. All right, so your code word this week, guys. Your code word this week. My favorite candy, and I only get this at Easter time, is Cadbury eggs. I've got a funny little cartoon there. It's The Rock, and I don't remember what movie this is from, but he says, well, he doesn't actually say it. It's just a meme, but it says, "How's the diet going?" And the girl says, "Not good. I had eggs for breakfast." And he says, "Scrambled," and she says, "Cadbury's," and he looks at her like that. So I just find that amusing, but. Cadbury egg. All you need to send me is Cadbury egg for your live lecture code this week. Do make sure that you viewed this meeting in its entirety, though, guys, because usually the questions I get from students or the topic proposals that are not approved are because the person just sent me the code word and did not view the meeting. So you need to view the meeting in order to ensure your own personal success. It's up to you guys. So with that being said, if you have questions, you can send me an email in the class. Otherwise, enjoy your week. Thank you.